Welcome to Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. Hi, I'm Devora Krasnianski, and I've been coaching women for a long time in all areas of life, and more recently I'm focusing on women in midlife. Midlife is an exciting time, but it's also sometimes confusing, and so I invite experts to join me as we unpack this crazy and fascinating time of our midlife. You can join us in our conversations at the Facebook group, Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. And today's episode is about parenting our adult children. I spoke with Yeta Solomon, a clinical social worker who works with couples and families and is a mother, mother-in-law, and grandmother for many years, so she has lots of lived and clinical experience in this area. Throughout the conversation, we spoke about the changing roles of parenting. Our adult children are still our children, but they're with their own lives and choices, and so how to navigate all that, especially if we think they're making mistakes. Yeta also spoke about how to have conversations about sensitive topics. We spoke about children-in-law and about the couple coming for Yontif and about single children living at home. This is an episode you don't want to miss. Enjoy. Good morning. I'm Devora Krasnianski from Jewish Women Talk About Midlife. And today's topic, talking about our adult children, parenting our adult children. So we have Yeta Solomon, a therapist, who talked to us about that important topic. And I really want to thank Ruchama Klaman from Mask, who again helped us organize this. So thank you, Ruchama, as we just talk about this important topic of parenting our adult children. But before we get into that, Ruchama, can you just talk a little bit, say hello, and talk a little bit about what you do?
Well, thank you. It's always great collaborating. And thank you very much to Yeta for joining us today. Such an important topic. I'm sure we're going to gain a lot of information that will be helpful. And about Mask, Mothers and Fathers Aligned Saving Kids, we just started our 26th year. We are a referral organization. We offer referrals for all mental health, including addiction. If you need a referral for a therapist, an inpatient, outpatient program, feel free to give us a call, 718-758-0400. We have a radio show Thursday night on the Zev Brenner station, which is 6:20 a.m. on the radio dial, and talklinecommunications.com. We have an after-school program in Crown Heights, and many more projects that we're involved with. Thank you, Devora, again, for doing these important conversations. Please go on to our website, maskparents.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchama. So, Yeta, let's talk about parenting our adult children.
Okay.
It's a big topic. That's a topic of midlife. Hopefully most of us have our adult children. It's very different from parenting them as teens. And when we're talking about adult children, firstly, let's just define what we're talking about when we say adult children. So but even before that, let's just talk about the work that you do in therapy in general.
Generally speaking, I work primarily with individuals at this point. I do couples work as well. I've been doing work on premarital education. I prefer to call it education as opposed to counseling. It kind of depathologizes the whole process.
Right.
Totally. It's very important. And the individuals that I work with, many of them have parenting issues, which are discussed in sessions. And it definitely comes up, and we're talking adult children.
So when we're talking about adult children, we're talking about an age or a stage. What are we talking about?
For argument's sake, let's say 18 and up, 20 and up, give or take. Yeah.
So we're talking about those that live at home, and we're talking about those who are moved out of our home, whether they're married or whatever. So we're talking about the full gamut of adult children. There are children, but they are adults.
Currently, the women I'm working with have children who are not living at home, some are married, some are single, some were married. So there are different situations that they're dealing with. And
there's a lot of situations. So we had some questions that came in advance, and I'm thankful to those who sent in their questions. So we'll be addressing those. And if anyone has any questions, definitely put them in the chat. We'll hope to get to them in this conversation or in the future, but there's so much to talk about.
Just before you start, I wanted to thank Ruchama and I wanted to thank Mask for all the wonderful work that she does and that the organization does. And it's amazing. They do amazing work in the community.
Right. 26 years. It's a long time, a lot of work.
Right, right. So the questions you were saying.
So we have several questions that came in that are related to adult children. So let's talk to the first question. And this is a biggie, that someone said, I see my adult child doing things that are headed for disaster. How do I bring that up? Or do I not bring it up?
Right, good question. So let's assume that it really is a disaster. I mean, objectively a disaster. We don't know, but let's assume that it is. So is the parent the right person to bring it up? Okay. The question is, and recurs, and it's going to recur in all the questions that we're going to address, what is the nature of the relationship between the parent and the child? Is it a good relationship? Is it an open relationship? Do they talk about things? So that's something you have to look at. And what does the parent hope to achieve by bringing it up? Does the parent feel that let's say she, for argument's sake, we're talking to the women now, the mothers, how is the child going to receive it? And that, of course, is based on the relationship. Is the child going to be open to listening to the parent or not? If the parent decides to address it, it should be done, I don't want to use the word tentative, but basically asking questions like, I've noticed, or, this, that, and the other, and let's assume it's, well, there are many different things that could be going on, but let's say, I've seen X, Y, and Z. Can we talk about this? Do you want to talk about this? If the child is open to it, how can I help? Okay. No judgment, just a desire to help. Is the child open to it? And it can go from there if it works. Again, is the parent the right person? Is a family friend, another family member, even if you have to go to a professional? So it's a question of whether it should be brought up.
So what I'm hearing is that firstly, the relationship is so important, and it's like, and then I want to ask later about if the relationship wasn't so good,
right.
Can you fix that? But I want to talk to that question soon.
Right.
So it's like asking permission to actually go into their situation.
Exactly. That's very well put. Yeah. You need to do, and with an adult child, you really need to do that. You can't assume that it's like a 5-year-old that you can just start talking, or even on a 10-year-old. And of course, once you get to 15, it's different. But with an adult, you really need to empower the adult child. This is your problem. Yes, it's affecting others, but it's your problem. Can we talk about it?
Or would it be helpful? And what I'm also hearing underneath that is it's worth talking to somebody to navigate, to figure out if you're really the right person, and if the relationship, and how and when and where, all of those things are so important.
Right, right. The parent may not be the best person. It depends on the relationship. And even if it's a good relationship, a child may not be, depending on what the problem is, a child may still not be comfortable talking to the parent, even if it is a good relationship.
So definitely talk it out with somebody else, even just to hear your own voice talking about it and hearing your own sentiments about it. Is there judgment in it?
Right.
And many times the kid will hear judgment, even if you don't think that you have judgment in it.
Because they're prepared to hear judgment. They're prepared to be judged sometimes, And it's a good idea to, again, with all these questions, you need to give it a lot of thought before you open it up.
Right. And I think, but what I'm also thinking is that it's not only thought, but talk it out with somebody. Don't just say your own thought, but get someone else's perspective. Yes. Of course, with your child's privacy and whatnot, and that's super important. But I think that trying to figure it all out yourself from one perspective can be a lot. It can be a lot to hold into your own head. So talk it out, whether it's with a professional coach, your spouse, somebody who will actually keep the privacy of whatever it is. That's another important piece, because I think that if the adult child knows that you're talking about them, that already has some level of distrust, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And privacy is an important concept, of course, and it all speaks to boundaries. The boundaries are different with adult children, and they deserve their privacy. And they need their privacy. They need to know that you're respecting their privacy. And that's another important word, respect. They need to be respected, regardless of what's going on. They need to be respected, and their privacy needs to be respected.
And they have to know that.
Yes, yes, it's very important.
Okay, so let's go back to the other thing with the relationship wasn't so good and you want to repair the relationship, repair it somewhat.
Right.
So let's just talk about mother and daughter, because many times it's that way, but it could be also mother and son. We're talking to women, so we'll just go with the mother part.
Right. So the relationship wasn't so good. Does that mean that there was a good relationship at some point early on when the daughter was very young? When did it go bad? Why did it go bad? What's going on? So
let's use this scenario, that an older child where the parent didn't have such great parenting skills when the child was younger and has become wiser, but the child is still, the relationship isn't so great. So the mother knows what she could have done, should have done. So the mother has some level of guilt or regret and now wants to fix it.
And has achieved some insight as to what she did wrong.
Right.
Okay. First, I'll say there is no parent who is perfect. Okay? None of us is a perfect parent. Everyone makes mistakes. Some make more than others, of course. I'll say this, it takes a long time. If a parent has gained insight and has made changes in the way they're approaching their child, her child, then it's going to take a long time for change to be noticed, because the child is used to a certain pattern of behavior, way of reacting, and so on. And that stays for a really long time. If the parent starts to make changes, the mother can't expect that the daughter's going to notice it right away and say, oh, wow, this is great, you're a different person, and so on. It takes time, because it's about trust. The daughter doesn't trust the mother to be a certain way. The daughter knows the mother to be a certain way. And when change occurs, the thought is, okay, so today was a good day. Today she was really good, but it's not going to last. I know it's not going to last. It was never good. So it takes a repeated change for the daughter to notice that the mother is serious about the change and is really trying very, very hard. So the mother can't expect that the daughter is going to change her reaction in the short term. It's going to take time. That's important.
Can I just interject here? Should the mother tell the daughter that I've been working on it, I've been working on myself, or like kind of like narrate it, or she should just be doing it?
Why not? Acknowledging that the mother acknowledging that she realizes she did a lot of things wrong and wants to change, shows goodwill and shows that she has learned. And the mother can ask the daughter for patience with her also. I know I'm going to make mistakes again. You know, please forgive me for what I did in the past, and I'm going to try to make things different. We're not talking about groveling, just a conversation, adult to adult. I'd like things to change between us. And help me, tell me what I can do. Is there anything I can do? Asking for input is also acceptable and a good thing here.
Okay. So if the daughter felt like she was always judged, you know, so that's a big one. Like we're going back to our first question.
It is. And maybe the daughter was judged, and the mother to acknowledge that and to really think hard. And there's a technique in anger management, stop and think. It's a matter of a person training themselves to not react. And for people who are naturally impulsive, that's a very hard thing to do. But to basically not speak until they've had a chance to think about how they're going to react. What's the response going to be if I say this? Will it be different if I say that? It's a process, and it's hard to do that because, you know, when you're faced with a situation, to actually, you know, stop and try to process it in your head takes time, you know. But in this situation, it's really about building trust. It's really about building trust between the parent and the child. It's very important. And again, don't expect a child to notice that you've changed. Give it time. It takes time.
And so even though they're not, they're still responding in the same way, and we know that we've made we've trying and we may change. Just trust the process.
They will respond in the same way because that's what they've been used to for a really long time. Ultimately, change will happen, but it's going to take time. They need to.
As frustrating as it is that we're making our change on our side, and they're not yet fully trusting it or not even noticing it yet. But so don't give up. Just keep
Don't
going
give
and doing
up.
the right
It's
thing.
hard to keep doing it when your efforts are not being acknowledged. It's
Totally.
very hard to keep it up, but you have to feel that, you are doing your best at this time. And now and then just check in, like, how am I doing? It's okay to do that. Are things
Check in
better?
with her or check in with yourself or both?
Both. Certainly check in with your daughter. Say, how am I doing? I'm really trying. And don't say, have you noticed necessarily, because if they have, they'll let you know and they'll react differently, and there's going to be backsliding. Progress is 3 steps forward, 1 or 2 steps back. It's part of the process. Whenever progress is being made, that's what happens. You have to expect it.
Is there value in the two of you going to therapy and talking it out with a therapist?
There might be. If it's a really difficult situation, absolutely, it would be a good thing.
But to start, you can start small and to start making small changes from awareness and then trying to build it back up.
It's
And
about
then
self-awareness. It's about
it always starts, but the only thing we can do is change ourselves.
Of course, but to be aware of what you're saying and how, and body language. Take a look, your child's face. How is she reacting? Is she looking at you? Is she making eye contact? Is she turning away from you? Does she look disgusted? Does she look, are you seeing a rolling of the eyes and shrugging of the shoulders, which is going to happen sometimes. I'm thinking right now this is more teenage behavior, but it could, you'll see it with adults, of course, too.
It also depends like what it was all along.
Right. And if it wasn't good all along, you really have to be patient.
And they may see it as sort of manipulating or like you're over trying. And so that also like what you say may not land the way you had hoped or the way you would, and that's okay.
Right. And it's also a matter of how the personality of the mother and the daughter interact. You'll often see parents, a mother and a daughter who have the same personalities. They're the ones who are going to clash. And what you see in that dynamic is each one sees in the other things about themselves that they don't like in themselves. They're seeing it in the other, and that's what may be causing that to happen, that process. So that's harder. That's harder.
The mirror.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so they may resist it even more because there's extra resisting it in themselves.
Right. They're seeing it themselves. They don't like it in themselves. They're seeing it in you, and it's rough. It's really rough. Yeah, if a child is seeing the mother changing, but they're still seeing the things in them, it's complicated. It's not easy.
All right. So now I want to just bring in, and what if the daughter is married and the spouse is in that picture too, and the spouse was either hurt by you or hurt on behalf of his wife by you.
So that's a little more complicated. The spouse, or let's say the husband was hurt because of something that you said or did, and the daughter's upset.
Right.
Okay. Well, is it a pattern? Is it something ongoing? Was it a one-time thing? All that, comes into play. Would an apology solve anything? It depends what it is. We were talking about a bad or not so good relationship between a mother and a daughter, but once you bring in a son-in-law, does the pattern continue? Sometimes the relationship with the son-in-law might be better than with the daughter. It depends on the personalities,
Or sometimes he could be upset on behalf of his wife.
Yes. So you can involve him too. You can involve him in that dialogue and see where that goes. But it requires a lot of, the onus is really on the mother to be sensitive, be empathic, and try to understand what went wrong. Sometimes it'll work and it won't always work. There are no guarantees.
Right.
You can just try.
So let's turn it a little bit. If the mother sees something that the son-in-law, or really it could be the daughter-in-law in this case, and it's just totally different, a son-in-law and a daughter-in-law, but we're talking about the child's spouse, and you want to mention something or not mention something, but you notice something that the child's spouse is doing or not doing, should they bring it up to their married child?
Well, it depends. Of course, it depends on what it is and how serious it is. Most of the time, you're better off not saying anything. If you're noticing something, the odds are your child notices it too, and sees it far more than you do, and is hurt by the situation. What's your point in bringing it up? Just to say, I've noticed this, to offer help, to offer support. What's the point of bringing it up?
And I think that's the underlying thread through everything so far is what's the point in bringing it up and what the relationship is. I don't know how typical, but typical enough. This is the question that came in, is that my son-in-law is not helping my daughter, and I want my daughter to have more help, and I can't be the one to help her. So mention to her to empower her to bring it up to her husband. What do you think about that scenario?
If she wants to. She may not. Is she upset about it? You don't know. All you see is he's not helping. Maybe it doesn't bother her. You don't know how she feels about it. It's a tough one.
So how to check in to see if she notices, like some women are taught or just kind of say that this is my lot, this is my husband, and I'll work with it, as opposed to being the mother and saying, like, what I'm seeing going on is not good for you, whether it's a judgment or not. So how do we check in with them?
I might leave him out of it and say, you're working so hard. Do you think you could use some extra help with leaving him out of it? See if she reacts, how she reacts. Like, no, it's fine. I'm managing. Or, yeah, I really wish my husband would help me. That kind of thing. But again, how are you going to deal with it? You're going to try to get her to get him to, it's tricky.
Right. So again, it's coming back to what do you hope to get out of the conversation?
Right. Empower your child to make his or her own choices and decisions in these situations. It's not, one of these major things. He's not helping. Okay, he should help. Yes. But, you don't know what's going on behind the closed door.
So let's flip it again. What if it's your son or daughter, but let's just say your son who's not helping his wife? Can you bring that up to your son?
Maybe. What I didn't mention before was, what if she likes to do things her own way? What if she's, I don't know if I'll use the word controlling, but she likes things done a certain way. So she prefers to do them herself than to have any help in doing it. Whether that's good or not is irrelevant, but maybe he has offered to help and she has, rejected it in some way,
So that goes to the judgment, is don't judge. You don't really know what's going on altogether.
Right. You're judging a situation without having all of the facts. Exactly. So you got to tread very carefully there.
So the first thing is to notice yourself if you're judging, or if you really, and even observing, even if you're just saying the observation, there could be a whole level of perceiving it differently than what's really going on.
Right. You don't know.
But on the other hand, not mentioning something big, like I don't want to really get into the whole topic of abuse or whatever, but if you're noticing something and not mentioning it, and the daughter is hoping that you mention it so she can bring it up. So there's all those sensitivities and all those ways. So I think it goes back to talking through it with somebody, talking to somebody first about your observations, because it can get really tricky.
It is tricky. There are many levels here. Do you get the idea that your daughter wants you to bring it up? Has she ever said anything? Has she dropped any hints? You would do well to observe more carefully before saying anything, if you have the opportunity to do it. If you don't see them often enough, then you really can't judge. If you see them more often, then you can really have a chance to observe them and see how the dynamics are playing out.
So let's talk to Pesach coming up, and wanting your child to come to you, or not wanting your child to come to you, which is a whole different way. Okay. How do we navigate all of that? So your child coming with their spouse, coming for Pesach, and we say we can only control what we do or what we think. And so let's say wanting your child to come and they want to go to their in-laws.
Well, Pesach is, generally people split it up, right? It's not like Shavuos, so you can only go to one set of parents unless they live near each other, and then you can split it. Right. But with Pesach, it's like, a lot of kids take turns, with first days, last days, going to these parents, but so I'm not really sure what you're asking.
So if you're insisting that your child come to you or not insisting or being hurt that they're choosing to go to their in-laws, that whole parsha
You're
of,
talking the first days particularly?
let's talk about the Seder, which seems to be like the bigger one.
Okay.
You get to the second days, it's like some people feel like they got the leftovers.
Okay. So the question is, does this happen every year? Is this the first year? I think it's a given that the couple goes to the wife's parents, and then they alternate. If they alternate, not everybody alternates for whatever the reason, but I mean, if you can't expect your child to come to you every single year for the first days. It's their choice, it's their decision, and you have to deal with it. You can't put them on a guilt trip. That doesn't work, and that's just going to mess with your relationship with them. So it's not a good idea.
I think the idea that they're adult children and it's really their decision, what's more convenient, where they're going to have more of a Pesach spirit, and maybe there's something to reflect on about why they may not be wanting to come.
Exactly.
I mean, it may be a whole bunch of reasons, whether the house is too small, or that the Pesach is just more fun someplace else.
It might be.
Or the weather is better someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it may not be about you. It may just be about what their decision.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But again, I don't see it as a problem unless there's a pattern of them always wanting to go for the Siddharm to the other side. If
For
that
themselves, they may not want to go to either side.
Okay. Well, if they have a family and they have children, they want to make their own. It's not a good idea to put them on a guilt trip. I can say that as I've dealt with many different scenarios myself, but it's not a good idea to guilt trip them. We want you to come. We'd love to have you come. Have them if they're going to come for the last days, that's fine. If they're not going to come at all because they want to be home Pesach, invite them for a nice dinner during Chol Moed. If one year, and it's not the case this year, there's a Shabbos Chol Moed, have them come then. And you might want to think about why they prefer not to come to you. What can we do to make it more pleasant for you to come here? What can we change? What would you like us to do? And maybe there's nothing. Maybe they just enjoy staying home with their children.
I think that the whole idea of that it's their life, and we can invite them and we can try to make it as accommodating as possible, but ultimately the two of them have to make that decision.
Of course, yeah.
And even if it's a single adult, they don't have to come home. They are still an adult that can make their own decision.
That's correct.
And while it may be hard, and we think that Pesach is a family holiday, they're still adults. And I think that for some of us, we really have to remember that they are adults with their own choices. And yes, while in our minds we envision perfect Pesach, that all the kids are around our perfect table, and all the grandchildren are all enjoying this Pesach together, they're still adults and they don't really have to do our vision.
I think the main point here is that the couple are on the same page, that they both agree. They've come to a decision together and they agree. That's more important.
And I think also don't make it more complex for the couple by inserting your needs or your demands. It kind of puts the couple into a very, like we want them to be successful in their couplehood and in their family.
Right.
Don't put our own demands or our own wishes that we wish our family would be together. All the grandchildren would be together, or whatever it is, or it's my turn this year. I mean, technically, if you're going to go with turns, it may be your turn this year, but it's really about them and not so much about us. But I goes on the other hand, don't lose yourself and say, okay, it's only about them. It's only let them. But you couldn't request, you can ask, but not insist. I think
exactly. Yeah.
Because if you totally let them do whatever they want and you don't even ask them to come, they may feel like you don't want them to come. Like if you don't even ask them to come at all.
Of course you're gonna ask them to come. I mean, I think that's a given.
I think that some parents I know that let the couple decide what they want to do. Like don't even invite them, because if they want to come to us, they'll come to us, and if they don't, they won't. So they don't even ask. And I think that the couple may then feel that you don't even care what they do.
If you want them to come, you really do have to ask if you want them to come. Yeah.
And not necessarily hinted. I know that some people don't want to be intrusive, so they just kind of drop hints without asking, without really trying to show their accommodations that we're trying to make this work for you, but the decision is up to you.
I think they need to express the idea that they want the children to come. We want you here. And then again, it's their decision. Hinting doesn't work.
Work when they were kids and certainly not going to work when they're
Right.
adults, when they can totally just say, but you didn't say.
Be direct. Be direct. Mm-hmm.
I want to move to a different question. Adult children, not married, living at home, and their role or your role of should we ask for rent? Should we ask for them to pitch in with chores or errands? It's a whole different question, but let's talk
It's a
about that.
different question, and it's a very complicated question. Okay, as far as financial contribution, let me start by saying I really believe that children should be taught responsibility. Okay, and that includes, you know, financial, physical help, whatever. But so it depends on the situation. Does the child have a good job? Is the child making a decent amount salary? Do you need the money? Even if you need the money, you might want them to have to contribute a little bit just to share some of have some responsibility, you know, depending on their age, of course. Sometimes a parent might feel, okay, I want them to save up their own money so when they get married, they'll have a little, you know, and some savings, which is valid. In terms of helping in the house, so did this child ever help? Was this child ever expected to do anything? To start, all of a sudden, the child is 22. Okay, you're living here. Now we expect you to do things like what? I mean, keep the room clean and neat. Hopefully that was always an expectation, you know, that kind of thing. You need them to do more? What? You can negotiate. Like, what do you think with your schedule you can help with? But it's really about whether that child was ever expected to help before, because all of a sudden to throw it at them, you're not going to get a positive reaction. It's legitimate. I think a child should help, but how are you going to do it?
So the questioner, when they wrote that, talks about, like, if they were living alone, they would be having to do all these things themselves. So can I expect them to do some of that in the house, like go shopping for food?
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that.
Even if they never did it before. But now that, you know, the difference of if you were living alone, you would be doing your own laundry and
Right.
you'd be doing your own cooking and your own shopping and your own cleaning. So could I ask for some of that?
Absolutely. They can be doing their own laundry. There are younger children who are expected to do their own laundry. Laundry, keeping the room neat and clean, helping out, going shopping, things like that. Nothing wrong with that. But it, you know, it depends on depends on what the situation was earlier when the child was younger. Were there expectations? Are they realistic expectations? And you have to negotiate. I'm going to need you sometimes to help me with whatever, and it's how the communication is handled.
So it's all about, again, the relationship and the communication.
Yeah, always. And communication is not just having a conversation, it's the body language as well.
The whole nonverbals, it's the timing, it's all of it.
Timing.
Again,
yeah, and it's not just you observing them, it's what do they see in you? What are they seeing when you talk to them? That's important as well.
So check in with yourself and make sure that you're in the right headspace for a conversation and to get some pushback.
Are you angry? Are you angry that they're not helping? Is that going to come across? That's not going to work. You know,
and be ready to get pushback. They may not want to. They may not see it. Like, it's not as if it's just because you're the parent and you ask for something or say something. Well, they say, oh, of course, let me figure that out into my schedule. They may not be able to or may not want to. And especially if you thought that at this point in my life, I would have an empty house and I wouldn't be having to make this bigger meal or whatever it is. Your father and I are fine with leftovers on Monday and Tuesday, but if you want a better meal, then how is that going to work?
It's going to work if they want to go eat out or if they want to cook.
Or that says, parents, we were going to go eat out, and now there's this meal that I have to be considering.
You don't have to worry about an adult child. If you and your husband want to go out to eat, go out and eat. You can offer to bring them something back if you'd like, you know, if you feel so disposed. But the child's responsible for themselves. They can take care of themselves. They're old enough, they can take care of themselves. I'm just thinking of family relatives where the children have had chores all along. It's a large family. And I used to meet them with a parent in the supermarket, and I'm now meeting the girls. They're old enough to drive. They're going shopping. It's great. It works.
So let's talk also a little bit to the one that expected the house to be empty and now the kid is still there, the adult child is still there, so they're still parenting the adult child. Like, it's 11 o'clock. Why are, curfew, or not curfew, but like, why you're out so late, or kind of still
That's
parenting their, because you're living in my house. So then when you're not home, I get anxious or I get nervous. But if you were living someplace else, I wouldn't even know that you were not home. So
exactly. Exactly. So that's speaking to a whole other, at this point in life, we're going to call it common courtesy. If a child is living with the parents, then I think they owe it to them to say, listen, I'm going out. I'll be gone for a couple of hours. I'll whatever, and to say I'm going to come back, at some point. Don't leave without saying anything, and don't stay out forever thinking it's okay without checking in. Because that's common courtesy, no matter who you're living with. You're going to be married, you want to go out with your friends, you'll tell your spouse, oh, we're going out, whatever, and for a few hours. It's common courtesy. It's not about a parent checking in on a child anymore, even though on some level, of course, it is. Yeah, it's funny, my children were recently remembering how I used to tell them, I didn't stay up sitting at the window, but I used to say, when you get home, come in and let me know you're home. And they did that. That was okay. And yeah, there are no curfews anymore when they're adults.
this one woman told me that when she was doing construction in her house, she moved into her parents' house. So we're talking about, she was deep in her 30s. And her father asked her, like, where were you? And she was like, for the past 15 years, you didn't ask me where I am. I don't have to tell you where I was. But just, I think we just default back to being a parent if our kid is in our house.
Right, right. It's not even necessary to say, where were you? You can just say, I was concerned because you didn't come home for whatever stretch of time. Where were you is not necessarily appropriate. You don't need to know where they were. She's an adult, he's an adult, you don't need to know.
I think that my point is that we just default back to being a parent. Like, for 15 years, they absolutely did whatever they wanted, and no one knew what. I mean, the parents didn't know when they were coming home. But all of a sudden, your child is back in your home, and you feel like, that's my role as being a parent. Like, where were you? Or like,
No. Where were it?
I think notice that in ourselves, that we may want to default to it, but it's not necessarily
The
the right.
parental role has changed. It has changed. So I'm going to go back to what I said about common courtesy and just about timing. If you're going to be home at 2 a.m, say, I'm going to be out pretty late. You don't have to say where you're going necessarily. A parent doesn't necessarily need to know, where were you? The role is different at that stage. You don't need to ask that. You may want to know, you may be curious, bite your tongue a lot.
Especially if they're living in your house, is bite your tongue a lot, because they are adults.
That's
And
right.
what I also find is, like, a lot of Bachrim or girls, when they come back from seminary and they're adults, and for a whole year you didn't know where I was every single meal and what I was wearing. So I'm not used to telling you or having to explain to you why I'm wearing what I'm wearing. But on the other hand, you are living in their house. I mean, they're living in your house, so you kind of feel like you see it more. So you may want to say something, but they're not used to it anymore, that you're parenting in such a minutia.
Right, exactly. I remember my oldest, when she started driving, she once went, she took a trial run to go somewhere to see if she could manage it. And she stopped at the nursing home where her grandfather was to see him. And she didn't come home so quickly. And she was a new driver and the weather wasn't great. And I was a little bit concerned. And I said to her, it was fine that you went. And she didn't have a cell phone at that point. I said, but just to let me know, oh, I might do this or whatever. And she understood that. She understood that. And she was probably 18, 19, whatever. So yeah, it's different. And you do worry. It's just, you have a different rule though.
So I think the flip, when we're talking about common courtesy, like, we will expect the child to tell us where they are and what their schedule is to some degree. Do we have to common courtesy and let them know our schedule?
I was just going to say that if you're going out, of course, and your child is home, of course, say, we're going out, we'll be back, whatever. You're teaching them. You're actually teaching them. I know that when we go away on a trip and we land, I'll just send a quick text to the family chat. We landed. And surprisingly, I didn't ask him to do it, but on Friday, when my son got back from a business trip, he just sent me a quick text, landed at Newark. And I was really happy that he did that. I wasn't going to bother him. I wasn't going to say anything. But you teach them by example. This is what I'm doing for you. This is what I expect from you. You're not saying it, but you're demonstrating it by example.
So that leads to a whole other question is like, how much should we know about what's going on in their lives? Like that he went on a business trip, who he met, that he landed, when his flights were, yes or no?
Yeah, no. Whether that he landed, yeah, it was nice to know. If he hadn't told me, I wouldn't have said a word. I wouldn't have said anything,
But is it expected that you would even know that he went on a business trip? Like how often like how much to know about their lives?
See, he probably would have said he went away, but he happened to have gone to Montreal, and I'm from Montreal originally, and he got together one night with my sister. He sent a picture, so I knew, Uh, another time he might say something, he might not. He doesn't live with me, so he doesn't need to tell me. But it was just nice to hear from him. He did. I wouldn't expect it. I wouldn't ask. But if he tells me, it's nice.
So on the same line, what's the level of relationship to have with your adult married children, or even adult single children, like to know who they're having for Shabbos, where they were for Shabbos, who like, or that
social conversation. What'd you do for Shabbos? They'll ask me, I'll ask them. It's a social question.
So it's not important to know that. It's just really just relationship kind of questions. So it doesn't necessarily be about what they made for Shabbos or how much Manas they went or where they heard Megillah. It's just part of the conversation.
It's a conversation, but it's on a more of a social level than I need to know. I don't need to know. It's nice to know. There's a difference. It's nice when they share these things with you.
Or share pictures or whatever it is. But if they don't share pictures, insist on it, ask them, it's just.
You can ask for a picture if then, I'll do that. Oh, my granddaughter made some beautiful, took a cake decorating course. And I go, oh, please send me pictures. And she did. And it's a different level, though. It's a different level. You're not demanding, you're asking, you're showing interest. Showing interest is different than demanding or expecting. I didn't expect it, but it was just nice.
Right. So I think that expectation is that, that you should be getting a phone call 3 times a week from our daughter-in-law or daughter even. It leads to that whole frustration of like, well, they're not. I think that they did move out and they do have their own lives and they're very busy.
They are busy. You're busy. They're busy. There's one thing that, I remember a client I'm working with was complaining. I called my daughter and she said she'd call me back and she didn't. I have that all the time. I do it to my daughter. She does it to me. We both forget. We get off the phone and I do it to my best friend. And it's like, we're busy and nobody gets crazy about it because we understand that. You cut them
slack. People do get upset when it's a kid. They should be available to me. And that's like, why?
Why?
You want them to have a good life, a busy life.
That's why you raise them. You raise them to be independent. That's so important. You have to cut the cord.
And even if you have the time for the conversation right now or are lonely or whatever it is, they may not, and that's okay.
Right. That's right. Exactly.
But I think that expectation of like, I'm calling all my kids and no one's available to talk to me. Yeah, maybe no one's available to talk to me.
That's exactly. That's
and even if you had this scheduled like 7:30 and the grandchildren will come on the phone or on the WhatsApp video or whatever, and they don't come, it's not about you always. Unless it is, and that's something to look at the pattern to see what's really going on.
It's hard to have a specific schedule. Like, there are some people who like to do that, but, to say, okay, it's 5 o'clock, so we need to talk. Why? People aren't that rigid. And they're busy. You have to acknowledge, that they have a family, there are children, there are things to do, they work, or, it's taking care of a household. You can't have the expectations need to change. It's about expectations. Very important.
I think that expectation piece is really important. And also it's the relationship before, like you said, it's like you can't expect that now that they're married, things will all of a sudden change, that their spouse will remind them to call or whatever it is, like, or that things will finally fall into place. We didn't have a good relationship as a teenager, so why would it fall into place? It might. They may all of a sudden appreciate their parent, but they may not. Like if you didn't have it before, don't expect that it will change.
I'll tell you one thing that I heard many years ago, and I think it's true. If you've had a nice relationship with a child who then turns into a surly adolescent and you have a hard time for a number of years, the odds are good that if you had that relationship before, once you're able to get through those adolescent years, you will once again have a decent relationship after that, when the child is an adult. So it's something to kind of, I don't know, look forward to, or to think, okay, it's going to happen. But you have to do your part. You can't expect it to happen. You can't expect to make demands. You can't expect to be angry all the time and not get a reaction. And remember, it takes time to build trust in a relationship. If you're building a relationship, it's going to take time. It's not simple.
Especially if you're repairing the relationship.
Yeah,
And also have realistic expectations is what I'm hearing.
very important. That's one of the most important things. Realistic expectations. We were talking before about where were you? Privacy, part of boundaries, an important part of boundaries with adult children. And you may be burning with curiosity, but that's too bad. It's sad, but if you have that deep desire to know why do you need to know? Look at yourself.
Right. I think that self-reflection and just seeing, like, yes, there could be a lot of your neighbors and your classmates or your have a different relationship with their child, but knowing your situation, knowing your child, and even with different children, you can have different relationships.
Exactly. Yes. Very
and
true.
Depending where they live and the spouse and 100 million different things. It's like each child, each relationship, and also another piece that I'm finding is that different times of their life and different times of our life, you may have more or less time for each other. And it's different. Like if they're a parent of twins, it could be very different than the amount of time that they have. They may want you more, or they may just be overwhelmed and not have time for conversations.
Yeah, it's very hard. I raised twins. I had 3 under the age of 2 when they were born. So yeah, it's not simple. It's not easy.
So I think all the tools of self-reflection that we might have gotten through all our own parenting to years, or the self-reflection that we are getting now, is so important. Just like, where do I fit in? What am I doing? What am I contributing to the relationship? What am I taking from the relationship? What am I receiving from the relationship? There's so much self-reflection. I think that's worth having a good friend or two to actually talk it out with.
One of the greatest gifts you can give your adult children is to have a life, to get a life, to have your own friends, your own social activities, and not to rely on them for that.
Totally.
So, you have to have your own, be independent. That you demonstrating that to them, living it is really important.
Not only for demonstrating, just for yourself. Just really have a life.
Yeah.
And have friends. But not only to have a life like when you're busy with work or friends, but really, I think a separate piece of that is to have someone you can reflect with. Am I being too intrusive? Am I expecting too much? Am I, what is my role in this relationship with our kids?
Right. And they may not tell you if you're being too intrusive. They may just shut down, and that there's a message there too.
Right. So seeing that message that they're not answering the phone, it could be that they're just very busy, or it could be that they really don't want to talk to you because you're just exhausting.
Maybe, yeah, absolutely.
And maybe one kid wants more attention and doesn't mind all those questions about where they went shopping and what the kids wore, and the other kid just doesn't want to go there.
And what I wanted to say before was that, if you have a number of children, each personality of the child is going to be different and interact with you and your personality differently. So again, expectations, knowing them, understanding them, their personalities, your personality, and the whole mix.
This is so important. I think this has been a great conversation. So thank you, Yeta. And how can people reach you if they want to talk to you?
You can give them my email address and my phone number. You have mine. Yeah, you have both.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. This has been very insightful.
It's really been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Yeta.
Thank you for joining me in another fascinating conversation about midlife. If you'd like to reach me, Devora Krasnianski, to talk about your midlife or anything else, you can reach me at jewishmidlife@gmail.com. And follow us at Jewish Midlife on Instagram and Facebook. And join us in our conversations on our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/Jewish Women Talk About Midlife.